snakes. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 2. Maybe just go around this way and let's read those initial passages.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. We have renounced secret and shameful ways. We do not use deception, nor do we distort the word of God. On the contrary, by setting forth the truth plainly, we commend ourselves to every man's conscience in the sight of God.
Okay, Fred.
Matthew 5:37. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one.
Okay, Charlie.
Now this is our boast. Our conscience testifies that we have conducted ourselves in the world, and especially in our relations with you, in the holiness and sincerity that are from God. We have done so not according to worldly wisdom, but according to God's grace.
Yeah, one more, Jim.
Do not lie to each other, since you have taken off your old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge in the image of its creator.
Okay, the general impression from those four pastors about how we are to live as Christians.
Shape up.
Okay, definitely is encouraging sanctified living, especially when it comes to what?
Speaking.
Your speech, right? And general principle is you're not supposed to don't lie, right? Be honest, be truthful, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Just a Christian is not in the business of half-truths or falsehoods. The world does plenty of that, sneaking around. A Christian doesn't need to do that. Okay, good. But now we get this difficult passage. If we are to be characterized by truth and not follow opinions or the changing tides of society, but God's word, and live by the truth, as we speak plainly in honesty, we know deceit doesn't have a place in our words or actions. What does Jesus mean when he calls us in Matthew 10:16 to do what? I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. So, how do you define what it means to be shrewd as snakes? And put number 2 with that. Why might some of those connotations lead Christians to struggle?
To me, it means be able to see, be able to decipher what you're hearing when you're in a crowd with other people. Listen to what they're saying. Know what's right and wrong.
Okay.
And
Have the ability to cut through
well,
what the world is saying.
yeah.
Listen before you speak.
Okay, James said that
Yeah.
today.
No,
The word here for shrewd is phronomai, and your phronos is your mind. One of the words for mind, your brain. So kind of to what you're saying, what is it? Be shrewd. Does shrewd necessarily have to mean a negative thing?
No.
I think that's what's happened for some. Shrewd means you're sneaky, right?
Yes.
Shrewd means you're gonna do whatever you have to do to get to the end result.
Would this be kind of like street smart,
Maybe that'd be a decent way to put it.
or is that too?
Street smart versus book smart. So the context here is what? I'm sending you out, and it's going to be tough out there as my disciples.
So to be street smart, you have to know the ways of the world.
Yeah, because what are they going to do if you're not? You're not. You're going to be in for a rough ride. Yeah. If you're not street smart out there, if you're not using your head, you're going to be in trouble with the world.
The Oxford Dictionary says shrewd means having or showing sharp powers of judgment, astute.
So that's not negative at all. That's just using your head, right? But at the same time, and then the word snake, obviously, for a Christian, when you think of a snake, what do you think of? Which makes it hard. You immediately go to the devil and the Garden of Eden, and snakes are bad. But can you talk about a snake without talking about what is a snake? When you look at a snake in the world, when it's just doing snake stuff, what do you notice about a snake?
Bugs. There's a place for them.
Okay, there's a place for them for sure. And what's their their not attitude? Not the snakes have attitudes, but how do they go about themselves? How do they conduct their business? Yeah, stealth. They're sneaky. They in a good way, right? They're using their head, right? They know you can't just go out there in the open in front of everyone and you're going to get killed, right? You got to kind of sneak up on people. And that's just the way snakes have been made. So that doesn't necessarily have to be negative, right? Be shrewd as snakes. And maybe the contrast then, what is then as innocent as doves?
Don't let yourself get caught up in it.
So you're
Don't become part of it.
using your head, you're using your brain, you're being smart, street smarts, and at the same
Choose
time,
words wisely.
uh-huh,
Gentle.
gentle. You're still a Christian, right? Don't get caught up in it, like you said. Don't. As you're living in the world, it's easy to get caught up in the world. It's easy to start doing things the way the world does them. Not you, Christian. And those are those first 4 passages we read. You still recognize you have a higher calling. And don't ever forget that. Don't ever let anything get in the way of you letting your light shine and living that faith, as James said, that you have been given from your connection to the word of truth. Any other thoughts on that? Is that, maybe you've heard that before and said, yeah, what does that mean? Be shrewd as snakes and innocent as doves. But I think the context here helps. He's sending the disciples out into a hard world with hard people. Use your head, and at the same time, you're always a Christian.
Pastor,
Yeah,
it's just like when you get your first call, you're going out into that big world too.
right.
And it's just like this.
Yeah.
You gotta use your head and see what you're doing and
So, for example, I'm not going to go into a new church 15 years ago, whenever, now it's 17 years ago. Okay, I'm going to change everything.
right.
Because I know everything there is to know. I just got out of school. That would not be a very shrewd decision. In fact, what are you going to do if you do that? You're going to probably make enemies pretty fast, right? That's just not the way you do things. Maybe in the corporate world you can do that, but even there, you're going to have some pretty unhappy people with you. And you're the boss, you can do whatever you want, but perhaps it's wiser to take a few minutes and kind of get to know the way things go and wait a bit before you make any snap decisions. An example of shrewdness, right? Here's some other examples. 1 Kings 3. Let's read that story. Remember Solomon?
I got that up.
You got it up? All right. Just stop when you feel it's right to stop there. I don't remember how far it goes, but you know the
About
story.
10 verses.
All right, there you go.
Later, 2 prostitutes came and stood before the king. That would be King Solomon. One woman said, "Hear me, Lord. This woman and I live in the same house. While she was living in the house, I gave birth. 3 days after I gave birth, this woman also gave birth. We were together. There was no one else in the house with us. Only the one of us was there. Were there. Only the 2 of us were there. One night, this woman's son died because she lay on top of him. Then she got up in the middle of the night and took my son from beside me while I, your servant, was sleeping. She laid him next to her, and her dead son she laid next to me. When I got up the next morning to nurse my son, there he was dead. But when I examined him closely in the morning, I saw it was not my son to whom I had given birth. But the other woman said, No, the living child is really my son, and your son is the dead one. But the first one kept saying, No, your son is really the dead one, and my son is the living one. They kept arguing like this before the king. The king said, This woman says, My son is the living one, and your son is the dead one. But this other woman says, No, your son is really the dead one, and my son is the living one. So the king said, Bring me a sword. So they brought a sword to the king. Then the king said, Cut the living child in 2 and give half to this woman and half to that woman. But the woman to whom the living child belonged spoke up, because her feelings for her son were very strong. She said, Listen to me, my lord. Give her the living child. Please don't kill him. But the other woman said, He will be neither mine nor yours. Cut him in 2. The king answered, Give the living child to the first woman, and do not kill him. She is the mother.
Okay. Shrewdness, right? What did Solomon, what was he playing on in this account? Yeah, knowing the emotion of a mother and the love a mother has for their child. And this is definitely an example where, remember when Solomon, when he was younger, prayed for wisdom, right? And you see what a wise course of action here to get to the bottom of whose kid this really is. Let's just cut it in half and then watch their reaction, right? Finds out pretty quickly which one is the actual mother. So you see the shrewdness in action. The road to Emmaus. Susie, you want to do that one? Luke 24, just those couple verses there?
Sure.
As the two disciples on the way to Emmaus talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus acted as if he were going farther.
Why keep them from recognizing him? Is he trying to be a deceiver? Is he trying to trick them?
Test of the faith.
Remember what happens on that journey as they're walking?
They're complaining, feeling downhearted.
We thought he was the guy, and now he's dead, so I guess he wasn't. And then what happens?
He explained, he went through the prophets and explained all that had to happen
Yeah,
as the Christ.
yeah. And do you think when he said he was going to go on, he had any intention of still going on? I mean, he knew all along, I need to come in and break bread with you, and that's how this story's going to end. But so I don't see Jesus as deceitful there. He has a purpose, right? He has a goal here. And right now you just need to talk to someone, but not Jesus yet. It is me, but I don't want to show you it's me. And I need to open up the scriptures to you and show you that this is exactly how it had to go. And when the time comes for you to see me, that time will come. So that's not Jesus lying or being
Do you think
deceitful.
Jesus said that he was going to go on farther just to see what their reaction
I
would be?
think so. I think so. Kind of
If
a
they-
test of
if
faith
they
thing.
said, yeah, okay, we'll see you later.
Right, right. Yeah. Of course, he knows how the story's going to end. But yeah, I think he wanted to see what they were going to, were they going to receive him joyfully, or, and they did. No, stay with. That's one of the most beautiful verses. Stay with us, Lord. It is evening, and the day is nearly over. You know, what a great thing for all of us to say. Stay with us, Lord. Come, dwell with us. The day is almost over. As we think about our lives here. How about Proverbs? Solomon again. Lynn.
Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you.
So what is the wisdom of Solomon in that verse? Do not rebuke a mocker, or he will hate you.
I don't get that one. I don't get that one.
Yeah, so how are you being shrewd? And
If you rebuke a mocker, you're showing him he's wrong, and nobody likes that.
so maybe that's not the right time or place
Right.
to have that discussion.
Right.
You're kind of pouring fuel on top of a fire. If someone already is mocking you and has it out for you, and maybe this is not the time to tell them you're wrong and you're screwing up, and what's going to happen? They're just going to turn it up all the more, right? They're going to step on the gas all the harder. And, not that certainly, so you have the rest of Scripture. There comes a time to rebuke sin, right? There comes a time to lay your cards on the table when it comes to, yeah, you're doing wrong here. But Solomon says, be wise in when you choose to have that discussion. Again, you don't want to make matters worse, so to speak, if someone is already at this level. Maybe think about that with internet discussions, right? And back and forth and back and forth. And is there a time just to maybe zip it for a while? And this is not making it better, right? It's just making things. It's just a catalyst to something that's already pretty intense. And, so James, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Maybe some wisdom there when we think about being shrewd with the world. Number 4, we kind of talked about, right? Being shrewd is not out of place for a Christian, but Jesus does say, well, be innocent as doves. We don't, again, turn into malicious liars. We don't walk the way of the world when it comes to our observation of truth and how to use it and when to use it. Be smart, but don't turn into a deceiver. Which gets into 5. Is all deception sinful? Maybe that depends on your definition of deception.
Well, in the example of Jesus on the way to Emmaus, he was deceiving them in the fact that he didn't make himself known as Jesus right away, but he wasn't lying.
Okay.
Lying is that part of deception is always sinful. But
He was
not-
withholding.
yeah, withholding information sometimes is very beneficial at the time.
For an ultimate purpose.
Did you ever do that?
I was going to say, does that happen in parenting ever, where you aren't totally honest with your kids, but you have a purpose, right? You're not trying to lie to them. But what might that happen in the parenting world? Where
You withhold, depending on the age, you withhold information,
Okay.
question,
I'm not gonna give you the honest answer because you're just not old enough to talk about that yet.
something like that, you know, you just kind of beat around the bush, I guess, I don't know. You know,
Tooth fairy.
Okay, tooth fairy.
Tooth
I
fairy.
mean, there's no such thing as, sorry to break it to you, there's no tooth fairy.
Santa Claus,
Santa Claus.
Easter Bunny.
And you can have a separate, as long as that doesn't take away from obviously Christ and the point of it. In a household where maybe it has, you'd say knock it off. I think of God in the garden, remember? After the fall, what is his first question? After the fall into sin? Remember?
Did you eat of
Where are you?
But where are you? Before that even,
Where are
where
you?
are you? You think God didn't know? What's he trying to do?
Yeah.
We're gonna start this dialogue. I know exactly what you did. And that gets into that. Did you eat from that tree I told you not to eat from? As if he didn't know. I'm gonna let you answer.
I was gonna put my hand.
Maybe that's with your kids, right? Who broke the vase? You know absolutely who broke the vase. 99.9% sure.
Like family circus.
Right. How did this happen? You know they did something stupid and broke the vase, but I'm just gonna let you come to that conclusion. You tell me.
Casper did it.
Yeah, right, the friendly ghost.
Well, you
So-
mentioned it on Thursday at Women's Bible class about missions and going,
Yeah,
going out to spread the gospel, but quietly,
right,
go as a teacher, perhaps,
Right.
to teach some sort of, like English, I think we mentioned a foreign language, but then invite them to your house later on for dinner, nice, and just then talk, you know what you're going there
Mhm.
for, but you're just not.
You haven't lied.
advertising it.
I'm here to teach English, and you do,
Just get-
but you haven't given full disclosure
Right.
that I'm also here for another purpose. I think that's a great example of you're just being shrewd. If you came out and said, here's why I'm coming, they'd say you're not coming in some parts of the world.
Really quickly.
And if you come here, you're not gonna stay. What good are you dead or in jail, right? So that'd be another example. Some people, we've had the discussion with, it hopefully will never happen here, but yeah, what do you, if the government ever is out to get you, and how much do you tell the truth if you're gonna end up, when it comes to the gospel, right? If you're gonna end up in jail or dead, how does being shrewd work its way in there, right? If the edict comes down from on top that you can't do this anymore, we must obey God rather than men, we know that. But how might you circumvent, how might you be shrewd in that manner? Think of like the early
You
church,
do
how were
like
they
they do in
shrewd?
China, like they're doing in China right now, you do go worship at somebody's house.
Yeah, kind of
5
the
or 6
underground
or
church
7 or 8.
thing. We're not gonna be able to build a church on the corner, but we're not gonna stop, right? So we'll worship underground, we'll worship privately in someone's house, are you disobeying the government? Yeah, but we have a greater government to answer to, and that's the Lord of heaven and earth. Other examples, number 6, circumstances from your own experience where the church or individual Christians need to be shrewd.
I lived in Spooner, we built a church,
Okay.
and, it's amazing how many, not fights, but how many disagreements you have over carpeting and that kind of thing, and, yeah, and people really lose their
Focus.
common sense and, are quite sinful about it.
Yeah. Say some pretty nasty stuff to each other.
Yeah, you really have to be very shrewd and careful in those situations.
So yeah, does there come a point where we're remodeling the bathroom, we're not gonna survey the entire congregation as far as what kind of toilets to buy and what kind of sink faucet to get. You know, you trust someone's going to make that because it's just going to open up. 10 people are going to have 10 different opinions, and
Right.
you're not being deceitful, but we're just going to do this. You know, and thank you for your offering. And maybe some of that with the church too. Like, here's what we're doing. You have your subcommittee, whatever you want to call it, and there are people who are smart and know what they're doing, and because that can just open up a can of worms. Right? Be shrewd. Any others?
The synod, even when they send missionaries to some of these places where we're not technically supposed to go,
Yeah.
they just say, you don't ever say that you're a pastor. Somebody accidentally did that and they wouldn't allow them in the country.
Right.
But we have friends that have been in China, and you have to just say that you're a teacher or something
Mhm.
like that, but you can't ever say that you're a pastor.
Yeah.
And that's being shrewd,
Right.
because at least they can get in and then do wonderful things.
Yeah, there's a higher goal here.
Pastor, that video I talked about a couple of weeks ago, about that pastor who disguised himself kind of as a
Oh, yeah,
old beggar, I guess that would be shrewd, huh?
yeah.
He-
So the guy dresses up like a homeless guy and comes to church, and the church was, I don't know if they were hiring or whatever, looking for a new pastor.
Well,
The new pastor was on
the
his way.
pastor was gonna be
Yeah.
recognized that day.
And he kind of didn't get a real warm reception because of the way he looked, and at the end of the day, that was the new pastor.
He went in front, sat in the front, and the usher or somebody told him he got to sit in the back. And
Just to
there's
see how
all
they
kinds of stuff,
react.
and then they introduced him, and here comes this old guy walking up, and your new pastor. And then he gave him a sermon.
Yeah,
But he did.
People were crying and really feeling ashamed, as well they should have.
yeah.
As well, we should have.
Well, we should have, because, yeah, it's happened here too.
Whatever you did for the least of them, you did for me, right? Here's an example of what you didn't do for the least of them. Yeah, that didn't happen in our, I forget, is that a true story, or was that one of those that after
don't
a
know.
while? I've heard that before.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if it was or not.
I mean, it's a cool story if it is.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of drives home a good point.
Right, right. Do we get the point? All right, well, how about this interesting parable in Luke 16? I guess we're over to, Char, you got it there? Luke 16, 1-9.
Jesus also said to his disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager who was accused of wasting his possessions. The rich man called him in and said to him, 'What is that I hear about you? Give an account for your management, because you can no longer be a manager.' The manager said to himself, 'What will I do since my master is taking away the management position from me? I am not strong enough to dig. I am ashamed to beg. I know that I will do. I know what I will do, so that when I am removed from my position to manager, people will receive me into their houses.' He called each one of his master's debtors to him. He asked the first, 'How much do you owe me, master?' He said, 600 gallons of olive oil.' He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly and write 300. Then he said to another, 'How much do you owe?' And he said, 600 bushels. He said to another, 'How much do you owe?' Bushels of wheat. He said, 'Take your bill and write 480. The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than the children of the light are. I tell you, make friends for their own generation.'"
Make friends for
Then the
yourself.
then the children are, I'm gonna read down here, unrighteous mammon, so that when it runs out, they will welcome you into their eternal dwellings.
Okay. So here's another example I think maybe Susie you mentioned last week. If parable's talking about God, this is kind of a weird one. So is God saying it's okay to be deceitful? God's definitely the boss, right? He's the boss of the manager, and at the end he's like, "Well, that was pretty smart that you were deceitful. And you should all be that way." So is God saying it's okay to lie? It would maybe be the first question someone's asking when they read this. So number 7, as you hear that parable, in what way does Jesus call us to be like the shrewd manager, and then what isn't the point of comparison? And that's where every parable is its own separate thing, and you have to say, okay, what is the main point of this parable? And he tells this story to get to that one main point. What's the one main point? would definitely say verses 8 and 9 kind of make the point. Here's a story that gets you to verses 8 and 9, but the spiritual, remember, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. What's the heavenly meaning? What's the spiritual point of this parable?
Make people stop and think without getting into an argument with them.
I didn't hear your first part that you said.
Make people stop and think without getting into an argument with them. Think
So
about
what was the manager doing? How was he using his brain? Knowing he's about to get fired, what did he decide to do to save his own behind?
Curried a lot of favor with people who owed a lot of money.
Yeah, so I'm not fired yet, and I still have the opportunity to be in charge of these accounts. I'm gonna need people on my side at the end of the day, so he goes and meets with these people, says, let's change the amount you owe. And that has nothing to do with the master, that has all to do with him gaining favor with these people. Is that being deceitful? And you know, people have argued about the boss, and did the boss have it coming because he was maybe overcharging in the first place? Was this guy just trying to be a good guy, and maybe they were being overtaxed over what the interest rate was too high? That's even looking too much into it. I think that is the point. I need to make friends because I'm about to get fired. Now, what's the spiritual point? Jesus says, when you go out there and meet with the world, at the end of the day,
You have to still live with yourself. Your conscience will get, if you treat people badly, your conscience is gonna kick in and say, why did you do that? And
okay,
it wasn't right.
and what are you trying to do with the world on your way
Get
to
them
the...
to listen.
You're trying to do what?
Get them to listen.
Yeah, you're trying to make friends, right? You're trying to get people on your side. Because you know at the end of the day, it comes to an end for everybody. So now it's not about getting fired anymore and whether he was deceitful or not and changing the amount that people owed. The point of the parable is you want to make friends with people. Because, verse 9, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And if you look at number 8, you could argue in the Greek there that a better translation would be use worldly wealth to gain friends so that when it's gone, they will welcome you into eternal dwellings. And if that's the translation, how does that change how does that kind of change it? Use worldly wealth to gain friends so that when it's gone, they will welcome you into eternal dwellings. Who's the they?
People.
The gaining friends, the friends you have gained. Well, if they're in eternal dwellings waiting for you, what has happened? How did they get into eternal dwellings? You made friends with them, they saw you as an example, you were able to give them the gospel. Yeah, their hearts have been changed. They've been welcomed to eternal dwellings, and now they're going to welcome you in there too one day.
That is a tough one.
It's a tough one, yeah. I mean, this is not as easy as the sower in the seed or the Good Samaritan or something like that. But again, I think you see the point. Be smart with the world. Do what you can to get them on your side, because at the end of the day, there is a spiritual point to all of this. You want to be welcomed into eternal dwellings, you want them to be in eternal dwellings too.
So in other words, we're not to decide whether or not this is a good thing to do. We're not to decide whether this is honest or not.
In regard to what?
To the amount owed.
Yeah, and that's where I think at that point you don't worry about. Jesus isn't saying, go out there and if you work for your boss, you can cheat your boss. That's not his point, right? He's not saying you can take matters into your own hands and do whatever you want at the company because, at the end of the day, if the boss is dishonest, then you have a right to make it right with the people who are.
What is his point?
The point is, make friends with people. Get them on your side because you want them to be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And you want to be there too. The story leading up to it is, here's an example of, even the boss said, wow, that was really smart what you did. That was really intelligent. He's commended for being dishonest because the boss realizes he needed to do whatever he could to make friends. Yeah, this is a tough one. This is kind of an interesting one.
I just get caught up in he's stealing.
Yeah, and that's where, like you said last week, this doesn't sound very godly. Why would God be okay with someone stealing, in essence? This is the way the world works. Make friends with the world because you want them to see you. You want them to receive you. And that's where, okay, well, how close do you get to the world then? And that's where you bring another passage. Well, don't be like the world, though. Don't let the world rub off on you so much that you become a child of the world rather than a child of light. However, you can't just isolate yourself from the world and say, well, you know, I'm here, I'm a monk, I'm a nun with all my other monks and nuns, and the world is way over here. No, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself with the eternal picture in mind.
So wouldn't the boss have been extremely mad at him? He's losing money.
And again, here's where in a parable, this is a perfect example of in a parable, just find the one main point. And don't worry as much about the details leading up to it. The boss commended the dishonest man
But
because he had acted shrewdly. And Jesus stops it there. He doesn't get into, and well, the boss is kind of mad at the end of the day because he lost some money. It doesn't matter. The point is, this guy was smart. And he used the resources at hand to make friends with the world. In the same way, you too. Use the resources at hand to make friends with the world because you have their eternal interest in mind. And stop it there. Don't go any deeper into it. Don't think, well, is he lying or is God okay with being deceitful? Not the point. Not the point. I don't think I've ever preached on this parable.
Is that a no?
Yeah, I don't know if it even, I don't know if it even comes up in the pericope, to be honest. I don't think it
I'll
does.
be friends at the end of the service.
You have to be very careful when you use.
You gotta be
them.
shrewd when you preach on it. Yeah. So, well, give an example of that then. How would you put this into practice in your life? Understanding Jesus' point.
I think you have to be very careful in how you do that. You don't want to be deceitful to the point that people are perceiving you as a liar. You want them to be your friend, so make sure that you're keeping God in.
Yeah, so I think even like the first part you said, that's where you have to remove, you have to know the story, but then remove God's not telling you to go and change people's bills. He's not telling you to go lie to people. He's not telling you to, again, the boss says this and you say, no, I'm actually going to do this. You have to sort of remove that whole thing from your head. How are you shrewd with the way you deal with the world in order to make friends for yourself? Charlie.
I think the example that keeps coming back to me is when we started the Word, and the discussion was had at that point in time whether or not to advertise that it was a Wells Synod church.
Sure, okay. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that would qualify under this discussion, yeah.
And the reason being was because of the perception of Wells, and even the Synod had advised, if I remember correctly, that, you know, to take it into discussion and say, is this something we want to do? Is it I think it goes back to the mockery versus wise person. I mean, if you go out and just broadcast what you believe and it creates more of a stir, you're not gaining anything. However, you know, are you more shrewd? Are you and the question that we had at the time, you know, do we broadcast that we're Wells? Is it of more harm than good?
Yeah, I know they have that discussion, especially down south. If you put Wisconsin Synod on your new church in Alabama, what are the locals gonna think? Yeah, no way I'm going into that place, like it or not. I see the word Wisconsin, I think North, I think Yankees, I think they're not like us. That is an immediate obstacle to the gospel. Now, maybe up here it's a different story because we're in Wisconsin. And so the other side of that is you don't want to be embarrassed of who you are and what you teach. And so that is a perfect example. Yeah, what's the shrewd decision here? Or maybe it is kind of dependent on where it's happening and what it is.
Yeah,
Lutheran,
I mean,
Lutheran church in a Catholic town.
Right, is an obstacle to, and it goes back to the mockery versus wise person. You're not gonna change a person who's mocking a person. It's a lost cause, but people who wanna know, you can get through to those individuals. Well, again, if you're in a case where you're in a Catholic town or something, whatever, Baptist, whatever it may be, I mean, is it an obstacle to you bringing people to faith?
And that would be the point of that discussion when you make those decisions. What's best for the kingdom?
Right.
And it may be a different discussion depending on your circumstance. I think you had your hand up, Ann, and then Jim, you wanted to talk.
I hit on verse 8 where it says, the children of the world are more shrewd
Yeah.
than the children of the light. We tend to isolate ourselves. Those of you who have been around maybe remember Pastor Weber with his Harley and his leather. Yeah. He always maintained that was a great evangelism
Yes,
way.
it was.
Because he would go out into the biker group and talk
I'm
gospel.
I'm one of you.
And then finally admit, oh yeah, I'm a pastor. But there again, the idea that we separate ourselves from everybody else, which is not good.
The first guy up in Alaska who I followed, he's a Deceitful, part of the Quick Trip clan. He had a charter fishing boat, and he would take people out fishing in Juneau, and he would spend, kind of like almost they called it that tent ministry. I'm going to spend half my time just meeting people, just taking them out fishing, and I'll take you out fishing, but then you're coming to church on Sunday. Kind of like a quid pro quo thing. They gained a lot of members from that, just being a normal guy.
There's no place for them to go.
That's the other thing. I got you.
Jump into those cold waters.
I think that was even in the Northwestern Lutheran. I think that was a story about that church and how it was a while back, but like a long while back. It was early 90s, but
Calling it the Northwestern Lutheran, it would have had to.
Yeah. But same thing. I'm going to be of the world because that's where you meet people who don't know about Jesus out there in the world. Everyone else knows the story already. But how were you going to that?
That thought is gone, but piggybacking on what Ann said with Pastor Weber, my old cardiologist, he goes to Sturgis every year.
The rally over there?
Yeah.
And most of us think of Sturgis as a bunch of motorcycle bikers, roughnecks and all that stuff, but I mean, there's lawyers, there's doctors, there's cardiologists, there's people from all walks of life going to that thing.
Absolutely.
So, I don't know what that has to do with what we're
Yep.
talking about.
What else? Different ways we, number 9 there, put the shrewdness into practice.
Doesn't it kind of all go back to the be quick to listen? You gotta listen to them first to find out where they're coming from.
Yeah. Yep. How about when maybe you think of like humanitarian aid efforts? Wells Christian Aid and Relief. Is the point of humanitarian aid efforts just to provide humanitarian aid? So the hurricane comes and wipes out the town, let's send a crew down there. And we are solely here just to help you rebuild your house.
And we're here to show Christ's love.
Yeah, there's a goal. That is a big part of it, to show love in our actions. Whatever you did for them, you did for me, certainly. We drill a well in Africa. Is the sole point of that just to provide water for people who desperately need it? That's a big part of it. However, the ultimate goal is we
It'll
have
be
a,
more welcoming for us to do the word.
yeah, these people really care about us. Yeah, we have a living water to give you. And oftentimes when we do things like that, that's where the church pops up, is around where the humanitarian aid effort was put into practice.
Zambia,
yeah.
the medical mission.
Yeah, the medical mission in Zambia, another great example. People lined up for, miles to get shots and basic things for their kids, and we were happy to help. Oh yeah, and while you're here. That's not lying or being deceitful. That's being shrewd with the gospel. Meeting a need physically so you can meet a need spiritually. I don't know, maybe some of the preschools that go up. There's plenty of preschools, right? So the Wells Church is going to build a preschool. Why? Just because we like preschools? Sure, we like preschools. We want to help parents when they need someplace for their kids to go, but I would hope you're using it as an outreach arm, right? We're trying to bring them into the fabric of the church, right? It's okay here. You're welcome here. The pastor gets to know them. The teachers get to know them. We want to see you more than just from Monday through Friday for 3 hours in the afternoon.
Our Little Lambs are basically supporting part of the Christian day schools.
Yeah, yep.
VBS's.
VBS,
Yeah, and soccer camps.
soccer
music
camps,
camp.
all those things, yeah.
On things like our prison ministry,
Yeah.
I think our hospital ministry, where we have pastors that, go out into the hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
Those are important areas too.
You could maybe go ahead.
Oh, I had a question. What Ann said just tickled my mind on that. What is the situation today as far as visiting hospitals and nursing homes?
Depends on the hospital and the nursing home, is my experience. All of them have different rules. Some can still only have one person in a room. Some have relaxed it a little bit. Since the whole Delta thing, I haven't been quite as on top as I was, so it could be different now than it was a month ago even. I'm not sure if there's a board who makes that decision. I suppose each group has their own entity that decides what. Some places you need to be vaccinated, some you need to wear a mask, some you don't. It really
But
depends.
can you go in and visit? Not for sure.
Depends on the place.
Call ahead.
Call ahead, that's a.
See it through plexiglass.
Call ahead. before
Don't drive an hour before you call ahead.
Yeah.
Call ahead before you put your loved one in there.
Yeah, that too, yeah. Yeah, so Steph's uncle in Ohio, he's in one, and seems like the rules change just about every other week, and whatever, yeah. Would this be where maybe like that whole PPP grant thing would fall into? Did we have, the story behind the PPP?
What is that?
Yeah, I opened a can of worms. So,
You see me over here going
don't
like
talk
this?
about that. Be shrewd, don't talk. So, the Wells studied it and they said it's okay to do it. Explain the PPP, Charlie. You did a good job on
Under the
Friday.
bus you go.
Not the churches, just PPP in general. What was the?
It is a program that the government established for essentially small businesses or businesses to take a loan. It was a payroll protection program. And so it allowed us to, for businesses to continue to make payroll payments. And then the discussion from a church standpoint was, well, are we a business, and basically, are you losing revenue? And then the payroll loan program would then allow you to cover that payroll for a certain amount of time.
So yeah, it was kind of one of those COVID deals where
Right.
all these small businesses. So my first reaction was, and those who were on council can remember this, I said, I'm not really sure, we don't really need it. Let the money go to people who need it more. And then I was kind of convinced the other direction, that is this a resource God has given us to use to his glory, and we don't need it, but it's available, and can we use it? And I thought of this passage. Is this kind of being shrewd, where in essence they're saying, here's $40,000. Just prove that you need it to meet payroll and your basic loan payments and utilities and things like that. And I said, well, we will use it for that. I mean, we're not in the hole like the local restaurant down the road who really, really needs it. However, we can find a good use for it for gospel ministry.
So is this a loan or a grant?
So it was a loan, but then it got written off. You just had to prove that you used it for that purpose, and then they said, okay, it's paid. And I didn't feel like it was getting in bed with the government, or it was just, which I suppose some could feel that way, but they're not telling us it just, as long as you can use it to pay your people and utilities and mortgage. which we did,
Mhm.
technically,
Yep.
even though it just went into the big bank
That's
account.
right,
I don't know, are you a small business?
I'm a small business.
I'm a small business, could I?
If they would have said, you can't use this for, or, if there's any like string, so maybe the school choice program would be another
Well,
avenue, this all falls under,
And
like.
the problem, I guess, and the reason I think I definitely would be for it for the church was if you were trying to project, and at the time it was given out, and we had no idea what was gonna happen with the church. And so instead of saying, well, we know, we need this because it's already happened, you're trying to look into the future saying, we have no idea what the church expenses could be versus what our monthly income will be. And so I think from that to saying, I mean, with people not showing up at church and everything else, we may not have income coming in. And that is one of the other reasons why we applied for it, was you're trying to project into the future. And again, it was used for payroll and expenses and things as it was supposed to, so.
Yeah, a bunch of people lose their job or just quit giving
Absolutely.
offerings because they're not here, and
Right.
then you're not in a financial position.
Right, you can't go back in hindsight and say, boy, I wish we'd have done that, and then go back and get it. It was, well, what do you think's gonna happen here? And that's also why we didn't then go for the second round too, was that you had to demonstrate that there was a loss. And, that's something we did not do, so.
Yeah, because at that point, we would have had to finagle the numbers, and we did not have a loss. So that was a good spiritual decision to not do it twice, because that would have been deceitful at that point. Shrewd as snakes, innocent as doves. Use your head. Key points. Christians are to exercise shrewdness as we deal with the world. Being aggressively crafty doesn't mean you have a license to sin. Exercising shrewdness is all the more important because of the goal we are pursuing, which is the salvation of souls. And that is the point of that Luke 16 parable. All righty. Next week, pearls before swine and bread to dogs.
Yeah.
2 weeks, thank you. Next week is a church picnic. So a reminder, 10 o'clock is the only service next week out at the park. No Monday, just 10 o'clock.
Next week is what?
Church picnic next
Picnic.
week.
Yeah, I know that, but before you got to that.
No Bible study next week,
Oh, okay.
because we'll be out at the park. Hope to see you all there, and have a nice lunch and enjoy some fellowship. All right, and we close. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all.